state, I don't know, meeting, I guess you call it. And Drew Anderson said he was looking for a rural red county. And unfortunately, they looked at Fountain County. But when I said unfortunately, I meant I was going to crawl underneath the table and not be seen. But we did get paid, and I'm very pleased that they have chosen our county. As I say, this is the first ever. And it's nice to know that the Democrat Party and the Libertarian Party care that we are here. Yes. And next, I want to introduce Drew Anderson. He is the communications director in Indianapolis for the Democrat Party, and he is going to run the show tonight. My husband Kip, where is he? My husband Kip has agreed to be the moderator tonight because Mark Berlino, who was the moderator, he is my vice chairman, has COVID. And so he is missing tonight, his whole family are missing, so I'm sorry about that. So anyway, Drew, I'm turning it over to you. Good luck.
Thank you, Jane. Howdy, y'all. Thank you so much for making time out of your busy schedules for this important conversation. Jane is right. I make it a point to try to come to counties like Fountain County, because personally I'm from Tipton, Indiana, and I never knew how many Democrats were around until I came out as a Democrat in Tipton, and then we all go whisper to each other. I realized that we were much larger than what people think. So I wanted to make sure that counties like Fountain are priority for our state party, and we have been doing that. I'm going to give the rules of the road before I give the mic over to Kip, our MC. I don't know if y'all noticed the sign outside of this room, but the sign says positive attitudes only, and that applies for this event as well. And so we're asking just a couple things. One, if you don't like an answer, so one of our folks answers to the question, do what my mother taught me, which is if you don't have anything nice to say, well, just keep it to yourself. So no booing, no anger. We want this to be a productive, thoughtful conversation. And then secondly, if you want to celebrate someone's answer because you like it, well, we like that. So clap and cheer all you want. And also, lastly, and then I'll shut up, I promise, feel free to stream this if you want. We definitely know that we have some of our campaigns doing that. And if you want to take some photos and post it online later, you are more than welcome to do that. And I think other than that, I will turn the mic over to Kip White. Kip?
Before we get started, I would very much like to thank Kelly Morgan, who's the principal here at the Southeast Mountain Elementary School, and Josh Davenport, the assistant principal, for letting us have this tonight and making the arrangements. I think doing all of the setup and taking a chance on the Democrats and the Libertarians to try to get some Republicans, but apparently we couldn't. I would like to introduce the candidates that we have. To my right, to your left, is Ray McCormick, who is the Democrat candidate for 8th District Congressional Representative. Again, to my right is Tom Mcdermott from Northern Indiana. Not quite sure exactly where. Hammond, that's Northern Indiana. Running for the U.S. Senate on the Democrat slate. And to my left is James Sceniak, the Libertarian, also running for the U.S. Senate. James comes from Veedersburg. And is Mr. Mauer here? He's not in anywhere. We may have Jeff Mauer, Secretary of State on the Libertarian ticket. Now, I have just run out of my notes. I have been promised that I will be furnished questions to ask the candidates. And I'm hoping they will come very shortly. In the meantime, I think you folks have introductions, right? Okay. Anybody want to go? Right? Absolutely. And I believe you are limited on time. I'm not sure how much. But we'll start.
Well, good evening, and thank you for having me to Fountain County and to this beautiful gymnasium and this great school. You see up there about the learning environment. I'm an old white guy, and that's the last thing we need in Washington, D.C. But I can't do anything about that. But what I can do is what I do on my farm and on my land is take care of it. So it'll be there for generations to come. And not only do it on my own land, practice what I preach, but is to get other people to do that. So I've been involved in conservation, environmental causes all of my life. I've been to Washington, D.C. more times than I can really remember, but that's where the action is. So at this point in my life, I've decided to do more than just work on all these causes across the country, from the Clean Air Act and Clean Water Act, Endangered Species Act, and what healthy soils. But to actually go there and be an example in Congress of how we have to take care of our land. So many issues that we face today, and we'll probably get questions about, don't really matter if we don't take care of our land, our soils, take care of the state of Indiana and this country. So that's why I'm running for office. The reason I'm doing it at such an old age is because my son's got old enough to take care of the farm now, and he's over in Illinois drilling beans. And Larry Bouchon said on TV, I'm unbeatable. And my wife goes, now run. So I'm running now.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Mcdermott. I'm the mayor of Hammond, Indiana, and your Democratic nominee for U.S. Senate. I'm running against Todd Young in November, and everybody keeps telling me I'm going to get beat, but nobody knows a single thing about me. They don't know what I've done in 18 years as mayor of the city of Hammond. They don't know how hard I worked to get to where I am right now. All they do is they look at a county like Fountain County, a state like Indiana, and they look at the fact our U.S. Senator raised $6 million, and they say, this race is over. I didn't raise $6 million. So does that mean I'm going to lose? I don't think so. If that's what we've become in America, then why don't we even bother with debates? Why don't we just raise money, see who raises the most? Right? It's ridiculous. It's frustrating when you're running and you read over and over again, this race is over, Todd Young's won. He shouldn't get reelected. He should be fired. If you have an employee on your farm or in your business that lied to you, that didn't show up for work, that didn't take care of their responsibilities, you would fire that person. But that's what Todd Young does to us in Indiana. I don't care what side of the aisle you're on, that's what he does to us. He lies to us. He doesn't show up to work. He prioritizes other people over us. We don't matter to him. I don't care if you're a Libertarian, if you're a Republican, or you're a Democrat. Unless you got $5,800 to give to his $6 million campaign account, you don't matter. I'm from Northwest Indiana. A lot of Democrats live there. A lot of Republicans live there too, by the way. It's the second largest Democratic voting bloc in the state, and the second largest Republican voting bloc in the state, believe it or not. But because there's so many Democrats where I live, Todd Young doesn't show up there. That's not being a good senator. I'm going to tell you why I'm running. I'm running because when somebody comes to my office as mayor and they have a problem, I fix it. I don't say, what party are you from? Before I get to work on your complicated issue, who did you vote for in the last election? If I did that, I wouldn't be mayor after 5 terms. I've been elected 5 terms because I'm good at my job. I don't ask silly questions. I just do the job. Why do we allow people to go to the U.S. Senate and ignore us? Why do we allow people like Todd Young to ignore us? His tractor's out there filming me right now, so I wanted to make sure he got that. He does. He goes to Washington, D.C., and he ignores us, and he'll show up when you have $5,800, but the fact is, he had a chance to take $8 billion back to Indiana. $8 billion does a lot of work in Fountain County. $8 billion does a lot of work in our schools. And he voted against it. He tried to kill it. And I tell you, that in itself, if you had somebody working on your farm or in your business that wasn't trying to do their best, that wasn't paying attention to the boss, and that lied to you, you would fire them. That's why we need to fire Todd Young in November. Thank you all.
Good evening. It's great to be at Fountain Square for my 7th town hall. I really appreciate meeting you, and I want to thank you for being here because this is how we make the difference. Hearing from you is absolutely essential. Campaigning is a two-way communication. If I'm not hearing from you, I don't deserve your vote. So it's great to be here, it's great to see you here, and let's engage. I'm Sceniak, and I'm a behavior therapist. I work with kids with autism, and I have a passion for people, and I'm going to take that to Washington, D.C. We need a fresh, modern approach. Right now, Washington is too intrusive, too wasteful, and it's spending your money like crazy. Inflation is hurting every single Hoosier, and Todd Young is at fault. He's spending more than Bernie Sanders. It's absolutely ridiculous, and we need better representation for Hoosier voters. So I'm excited for tonight because I'm excited to engage you, and I'm excited to hear your questions because I will be representing you when I'm elected. So I'm looking forward, and when we look at what we're going to do in the future in Washington, I'm optimistic that our future generations will have opportunities of innovation that we haven't seen in the past generations. But if we don't fight for those freedoms now, we're going to lose them. So we have to continue to fight, we have to continue to pursue for things like privacy, things like making immigration easier, making the American dream possible. These are all doable, but we have to fight now, and we have to do it this election. So I appreciate you looking at my platform, and I appreciate the fact that you're here engaging in the political system. Thank you, and again, I'm looking forward to all those questions.
I'm going to ask the questions from here, partly so I can keep track of them and not spread them all over the floor. Initially, there are several questions on gun control or gun rights in light of the current reports on the mass shootings. And I would like to direct these questions to both senatorial candidates. And I don't care how you think, Mr. Clark, you want to take this? Let me read a couple of these. What gun control measures will you propose to keep people safe while not taking away rights? In light of the recent school shooting and gun violence, what are your plans to keep kids, teachers, and citizens safe? And what do you think is at least one answer to stop the shootings in schools and other places?
Thank you. Great question. Second Amendment. I have a weapon that I carry in my car. I'm been a licensed gun holder in the state of Indiana for years. It's for my personal protection. I have people that get weird with me sometimes and they scare you a little bit, and I live right next to Chicago, so I believe in the Second Amendment. I believe in the right to arm yourself to defend yourself. I believe in the right to hunt. I believe in the right to have a shotgun to protect your home. But I don't believe the Second Amendment covers is the right to buy an AR-15 when you're 18 years old and to kill a classroom full of kids. That's where you gotta draw the line. And I'm a lawyer. I taught constitutional law when I was a teacher at Purdue Northwest. I taught about the Constitution, I studied the Constitution, I passed the Indiana bar exam, so I know the Constitution. And just the Second Amendment does give us the right to bear arms, I agree, but it starts off, the first three words are a well-regulated militia. Well-regulated. Regulated. Regulated equals laws. You know, the First Amendment's important, it's the first. It's the one that allows us to speak and to assemble, to peacefully assemble, by the way, interestingly enough. If you peacefully assemble in a classroom, you shouldn't be killed by an automatic weapon, right? Those kids had a First Amendment right also. But the First Amendment is not, you can't just make threats against the President of the United States. That's against the law. You can't shout fire in a crowded theater. That's the common one we always use. There's laws, even though it's the First Amendment, doesn't mean you can say whatever you want. You have restrictions and regulations. So if I were in the U.S. Senate right now, the first thing I'd have to do to move this type of legislation forward against automatic weapons, which is what I'm talking about, the ones that kill multiple people in minutes, what I would do is you have to tackle the filibuster. Nothing's getting through that Senate because it's broken, because of the filibuster. And I know it's not sexy to talk about the filibuster, but until that goes away, nothing's going to happen in America. You can't move any bill forward because when they built the Senate, the founding fathers, they talked about the senators are going to sit around and debate issues and discuss the important issues of the day, and we're going to think about it. That's why we have 6-year terms. And what it's become is a place where we just block it. We don't debate anything. Just, no, you don't have 60 votes, we're not moving forward. So you tackle the filibuster, you're not going to be able to move anything forward like legislation against automatic weapons. So, thank you. I appreciate it.
This is a great question. I work in a school. I'm a behavioral therapist, so it's a very emotional issue when you look at what and how the schools are affected. There are solutions, and I'll get to that in a minute. But first, on the gun rights, when we say guns to Ukraine, we do that because they're allies, and when we say stop them from going to Russia, we do that because they're enemies. When we're stopping guns in the hands of your Second Amendment rights, the government is saying you're the enemy. It's a very complicated issue, but the Second Amendment is very clear. It shall not be infringed. When we're talking about solutions, we're talking about behavior solutions. We're talking about how do we make schools safer? How do we get mental health to those who need mental health? And how do we give opportunities? If you actually look at violence as a statistic, the last 30 years, it's decreased dramatically. Gun violence and all violence has actually decreased the last 30 years. The only 2 years that it went up was during COVID. So this indicates a couple things to me. It indicates that violence, the bigger issue is we need to combat it with opportunity and innovation and hope and love. And so we talk about these things, but as the American dream, we need to make sure that we are creating a society that allows people to flourish. When people are flourishing, they become less violent. So on this issue, I see it less of a gun issue, but it is a violence issue, and the way we combat it is through opportunity.
Phony baloney. When I was a little boy, my parents didn't let me have a gun until I was old enough to handle one. Then it was under their instructions, shooting at a little can through the fence. Then they allowed me to take a .22 rifle and go rabbit hunting. And I became a darn good shot, trying to shoot a rabbit on the run behind my beagle. Then they let me use a Ward's single-shot shotgun where you could put one in there. I've been hunting all my life. I've been around guns all my life. I now use an SP-10, which is a 10 gauge, and you get 3 shots. That's all that'll go in it. So everybody that goes with me, I have a duck hunting business. They have their guns in a gun case. We store them away safely, driving out to where we duck hunt. You get 3 shots to kill a duck. But in this country, you want to walk into a grade school, you get 100+ shots. What sense does that make? They don't want gun regulation. We regulate guns on how many shots you get at a migratory bird to make it fair. If you're going to make guns to shoot people, then I'm scared. I don't need a gun. I don't want to be shot. But I'm not going to carry a gun around with me because I'm afraid people are going to shoot me. I'm going to get away. I'm not going to get into a gunfight in the school or at the church are at the restaurant, I am going to get away. But I know what guns do. And when you shoot children in a school, I know what that does to them. It's horrific. So if you want to say, let people buy guns, and as at one debate I was at, they were against all gun restrictions. So I mean, any age, any capacity, any gun, period. That's not my position. You need to be 21 to be old enough to buy a gun that was designed, manufactured, merchandised to shoot people. When people are carrying a gun, I say, who are you going to shoot? Because if you shoot them, you're going to kill them. Why do you carry a gun around to kill people? I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to shoot anybody. They say for their defense. Well, defend yourself in your home. Fine. I'll defend myself and get away. I'm not getting in a gunfight. I'm not killing anybody. So we hear people saying they defend some of these things. I'm with the children in that school. When that boy throws that door shut with a high-powered rifle, a military rifle, they have no chance. He shouldn't have that gun in there. He shouldn't be able to go in there and throw the door shut. I'm against that. If you want to buy a gun as a young person, then after you're 18, you can buy a hunting gun. Not a high-powered rifle. Then if you want to go hunting, you get 3 shots. You don't need to buy a gun at 18 where you can throw clips in there and shoot 1 shot every second. When people walk into a room and they're carrying a gun, I know what a gun can do. How am I supposed to know whether that guy is a good guy or a bad guy? His life, my life, is in his hands. So when I see people packing guns, I don't want to die. I don't want to be around people carrying a gun that says this gun was designed and made to shoot people. And I'm packing it in the movie theater. I'm packing it into the restaurant. I'm packing it in anywhere I want to go. Open carry law. When the legislature in Indiana said, you don't have to register a gun in Indiana. You know who was against that? Law enforcement. So when they pull you over, they know this man has went through all the work and fingerprinting to get his registration. So they know he's a law-abiding citizen. Now they don't know who you are, but you're likely to have a gun. When they took that registration away, they defunded the police because the money from the registrations went to law enforcement. So I'm not going to hide around and say Second Amendment this and Second Amendment that. I'm telling you where I stand. These are damn dangerous weapons. I've been around them all my life. Immature. He says mental illness. We have to attack mental illness. 1 in 10 murders is involved with mental illness. That's not the problem. Too many guns on too many people's hips. And when they get mad, they get upset, they want to do something to their wife. Too many people are saying, doesn't matter. We don't need red flag laws. If he threatens his spouse, doesn't matter. We're against gun control. I'm for saving people's lives. 45,000 people last year died from guns. 45,000. He's trying to tell you that the statistics are off. Have you seen the statistics on mass shootings in this country? It's going up like this. There's somebody out there right now that's trying to figure out how to set the record. Do you want it to be at your school? I don't. Thank you for your time.
just the other day, and it followed, I think, the publication of sort of the pictures from the Vietnam War. And Jay Johnson suggested that if the pictures of the slain children were published, that would perhaps sway opinion in this country. Just yes or no, do you think that's a good idea? Provided that you provide privacy and get permission from the parents. Mr. Sceniak?
No. I don't.
I'm going to say no. I think that's a personal, private issue with the families, and that's up to them to release those photos.
I agree with James. If the parent felt comfortable releasing a picture, I'd be for it, but I wouldn't want to see it personally. I would never want to see that.
And I would agree with you, gentlemen. No, that would be too traumatizing. Young kids already have to hide under the desk as though there were a shooter in their school, to put out on the internet and so forth pictures of what's happened to these children. Too much trauma.
Thank you. The next question concerns immigration. And let me ask you, we've got a lot of questions to go through. Let me ask you to keep your responses to no more than a minute and a half. Would that be fair? Mr. Mcdermott, let me address this to you first. What are your proposals on comprehensive immigration reform, especially in light of our severe shortage of employees, and specifically here in rural America?
Thank you, great question. I want to start off by saying I think I might be the only candidate who's married to an immigrant. My wife's from Polish, 100% Polish. She took 23andMe, we thought it was broken. She was literally 100% Polish. She was adopted by an American family from a Polish orphanage at the age of 3.5, brought to America, went through the naturalization process, and became an American citizen. And I support the melting pot. I support America. I support people immigrating to America for asylum purposes, people coming to America for the American dream. I support that. Legal immigration. And I want to be part of the solution. I don't support people coming in illegally, but we have to recognize that we do have millions of people that do live here. They've lived here their whole lives. I have people in my city, Hammond's 30% Hispanic population in our city. A lot of the population that we have in the city of Hammond, a sizable percentage of them are DACAs. You know, they're dreamers. They've been here for decades. They're from Mexico, their family's from Mexico, they never immigrated legally, they've been here their whole life. They don't even really speak Spanish in a lot of cases, and yet, in the last administration, they talked about sending people like that back to Mexico. And they have no family in Mexico. They never lived there. That's craziness. This is America. They've been here for decades. We got to figure out a way to keep them here. And I do support legal immigration. And I also agree that immigration is good for inflation control as well. We're paying $15 an hour to lifeguards in the city of Hammond right now. We can't get anybody for less than $15 an hour. Why not have a larger workforce so that there would be more people that would be willing to take the jobs that a lot of us aren't taking? I think that's a good thing for inflation control. But I dare say Senator Young doesn't want to fix inflation. His first campaign ad was talking about the Biden's failed immigration policy. Senator Young's been in Washington, D.C. for 12 years. He was in the Senate for 4 years with Donald Trump as the president. They didn't pass immigration reform then, so now he's campaigning and saying it's Biden's fault? He doesn't want to fix immigration. He wants to campaign on it and blame Biden for it. That's not a leader. That's not a senator. He's one of the 100 most important people in the United States government. He's blaming Biden and he's blaming others. He's been in Washington, D.C. for 12 years. He doesn't want to fix it. He wants to campaign on it. That's even worse. Thank you.
Immigration is absolutely an important topic because it's how we can have the American dream. I come from immigrant families from both sides. I can trace back where they came over to America. The problem right now is we really don't have a legal way to get to America. Yes, I say that and you're going to say, well, blah, 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 they didn't come. But if you look at the lawyers and expenses and what nations can actually come in, it's really difficult. So the best thing we can do for immigration is really just to make it legal. We have to make it an easier process for people to come in so that we can not have people illegally coming over. If we make it easier for people coming in, we can still vet them, but then we don't have to deal with as many people wanting to come in illegally. So immigration is part of America. It's the melting pot, and it's how we do things in America. And we need to get back to allowing people to come in and have that same American dream that my grandfather did and that my grandmother did.
The reason I'm running for office is I'm not a talker, I'm a doer. So if you want to come down to Vincennes, the last Saturday in July, you'd be welcome to come to our Festival Latino. It's our 5th one. I started. The Latino population is critical to my county. We bring in millions upon millions of dollars of produce, watermelons, pumpkins, peas, broccoli, sweet corn. It goes all over the country. You know what the farmers say that help pay for this? If they leave, we're done tomorrow. We need to show respect for our Latino population and what they do for this country. And for just opening up the floodgates, of course not. It would be everybody in the world's going to want to come here. But we have H-2A workers that come here and play an important role. And when we use race as a tool in politics, we drive them out of the community. It's disrespectful. There they are out there till 10 o'clock at night. We put on with crop dusters our insecticides and chemicals now at night because they're there from daylight to dark, picking that produce. And it's not just them, it's the Latinos that it incorporated into our community. So I don't see everybody yelling about keep those Ukrainians out of here, but everybody wants to demonize the brown man that's trying to get in here. They're trying to escape just as big a horde in Central America as what the Ukrainians are. Let's show some empathy to our neighbors. They're good people, they're religious people, they're hard-working people. You know what the farmers say? These are white farmers that are my neighbors. I love these folks. I love them. I love them too. Thank you.
This is from Vicki Bellinger. I truly appreciate your perspective as a farmer on soil conservation. It seems that is all I see on your website. In order to be elected, you get to know what your stance is on education. And Rachel Foster says, what are your ideas to help the teacher shortage, and do you support the voucher program? Let me have you answer that first.
Well, that's 3 questions in a minute and a half.
Yes, that is. Yes, I'm not sure.
All right, so I went to Decker Grade School, graduated the top 10 of my class, and in the bottom half of the class. But you know what, all those kids, very poor, but they got an equal chance. Education is to be an equalizer. Whether you're in an urban setting or an extreme rural setting, those teachers, that public school is what gives everybody a chance. We have this epidemic in our communities where drugs are coming in, highly addictive, and the social structure of the family is breaking down. That principal and her teachers are the safety net that gives them an opportunity to thrive and have great lives. That's public education. If we're going to give vouchers to school, I'm not against it. My grandkid goes to a Catholic school. They have to answer just like public schools do. If we want to have good education, you got to be able to pay teachers out here in the country and recruit in teachers that want to work for lower wages than what they can be paid in Zionsville and Carmel. That's recruiting in, and that's quality of life, where they say, I would rather live in Fountain County than Carmel. But low-paying jobs are are not the answer, and that's what the state legislature's been doing, is robbing away from the country schools and giving it to the big private schools. That needs to be thanked.
Thank you. Mr. Sceniak? Just as a reminder, what are your ideas to help the teacher shortage and do you support the teacher voucher program? And I suspect that maybe your website does not have so much on soil conservation.
So we'll go with the teachers first. I work in a school, I see the teacher shortage, and I see the stress on the teachers. On the federal level, about 6 to 8% of your school's funding comes from the federal level. The problem is that to comply with the strings attached to that federal funding, it actually ends up often costing your school more than they're receiving. So on the federal level, there's absolutely solutions, and it's actually getting rid of the red tape. When we look at a more efficient way to do this, we can put that tax money back from the federal, put it on a lower level so that we can actually support teachers on a local level. What if that same money went to your county, that was taxed on the federal level? What if it was taxed on the county level? We could then directly support teachers with higher pay and get them quality help. So my goal is to remove the federal red tape from it, because that's how we support teachers, and that's what we need to do. When it comes to farming and conservatorship, we support farmers. That's how we do it in Indiana. Indiana's huge on agriculture, and a lot of ways, again, is removing red tape, making it easier to grow whatever produce you want to grow, including hay. So there's absolutely ways we can help farmers as well.
Thank you. That's definitely one thing we all have in common in Fountain County and from Northwest Indiana is the teacher shortage. My daughter went to Indiana University with the goal of becoming a high school teacher, high school English teacher. And she succeeded, and she got in and she taught high school English for 5 years and was completely demoralized and dispirited. And now she's a third-year nursing student. So she's part of the problem. And she went to college to become a teacher. And what she found is a state that doesn't want to reward her or her profession for the hard work that they do and how important they are. We recognize our police and firemen, we treat them well, teachers we don't. It makes no sense. It makes no sense what we do here in the state. And then we wonder. I come from a family of teachers. My mother-in-law from New York was a teacher. My mother-in-law in New York, Long Island, made $100,000 a year teaching. And we pay 40% of that to our typical teacher in Indiana. And it's a shame. And you wonder why we have a teacher shortage? If we prioritize teacher salaries and we raise the salaries high enough to attract teachers, I don't think we'd have a teacher shortage anymore. I think if you're paying $65,000, $70,000 to a starting teacher, I have a feeling there's a lot of teachers that would be excited about going back in the classroom. But when we pay $35,000 and $40,000 and we scratch our heads and wonder what's going on, it's not that difficult. I've run a city for 18 years. And I have a loyal workforce, but we take care of them. I treat them well, I tell them how good of a job they're doing, we pay them well, and they stick. It's our fault that we have a teacher shortage in Indiana, that we allow our legislators and our governor to get away with the stuff they're getting away with. But I'm not trying to make enemies out of them, I'm running for U.S. Senate. I just want you to know that as a U.S. Senator, I'm going to do everything I can to support your public schools and your teachers, because I come from a family of teachers. And I want to help, because if we start crumbling at the education level, we don't have much of a base to build on anymore. So thank you for the question. It's okay.
Mr. Mcdermott, let me direct this question specifically to you. From Sue Mitchell. I'm directing this question to you as a candidate. You're the only candidate I saw a stated religious affiliation for.
Yep.
I'm very concerned about the growing interference of religious right evangelicals attempting to legislate based on religious beliefs. Are you willing to put down your own personal convictions to stand with the majority of your constituents, speaking in regards to Roe versus Wade in particular? And what restrictions would you apply if you're not for, it says for total repeal?
Yes.
I
Thank you.
think it,
Yeah, I get the question. I'm a Catholic. I was baptized, confirmed, went to law school at Notre Dame, married my wife in Basilica, South Bend. I'm Catholic. I'm proud of my faith. However, my entire life, there's been this case called Roe versus Wade. Whether you're on one side or the other, it's been the law of the land my entire life. 1972, I was born a couple of years before that. We don't need to get into details. My whole life. When I go to law school in Notre Dame, the first thing we learn about really is something called stare decisis. It's precedent, the law of the land. So that there's consistency in court cases. We don't just have judges, willy-nilly changing, holdings of cases that have been case law for years. So now all of a sudden on the Supreme Court, because of some gamesmanship, let's be honest, Merrick Garland shouldn't be the Attorney General of the United States right now. Merrick Garland should be on the U.S. Supreme Court right now. And if Merrick Garland was on the U.S. Supreme Court right now, this Dobbs case wouldn't be 5-4 to overturn Roe versus Wade. It'd still be 5-4 to keep precedent in place. We've had 50 years of precedents, and now suddenly, within days, within a week or two, we'll probably hear this case, the Dobbs case, come out and overturn Roe versus Wade. And Indiana will be very quickly, right after that, most likely outline the ability to get that procedure done. And I'm a Catholic, but I'm also pro-Roe versus Wade. There's an ability that, even though personally you feel this way, having a policy in America that doesn't make this, that forces women to carry, a pregnancy all the way through, I just don't see how this is going to work out. I don't think that women are going to take it very well. Last time I checked, it takes 2 to make a baby. And I only hear about restrictions putting in place on half of our population, but there's nothing, men can make a baby 365 days a year. Women can pretty much only have 1 baby a year, and yet we're not talking about restrictions being placed on men at all. It's all about women losing their rights, and I don't agree with it. I believe in consistency. I believe in the law of the land, Roe versus Wade. So even though I'm a Catholic, I support Roe versus Wade, and I plan to do that as a U.S. Senator. Thank you for the question.
I'm sorry, that question was directed just to Mr. Mcdermott. Let me direct a question to Mr. McCormick with a follow-up with a fundament to the Libertarian. Mr. McCormick, do you think political special interests have fractured the Democratic Party support?
I'm not sure I heard all that. Could you repeat that?
I say, do you think that political special interests have fractured Democratic Party support?
Well, of course. It's fractured our country. Money. You just heard how much his opponent has. If you're from Wyoming and you can't possibly raise $500,000 and a special interest group gives you $3 million, they have bought your vote. My opponent lives in Washington, D.C. He lives out east. He doesn't come here. He doesn't like it here. He wasn't born here. I got a district right under my fingernails there. Can I raise as much money as him? Yeah. What he's got is a half a combine. The combine cost $1 million. He's got $500,000. So it's not a big deal. I sell my combine, I got twice as much money. But that's not the way it's done. The way it's done is his special interest. And probably people will try to buy my interest. And it's going to happen when you got to have millions of dollars, probably $3 million, for me to run for Congress. That means I got to spend the day. They just told me yesterday, don't go to these meetings, spend all day on the phone, 10 hours a day at least, asking for money. The only way I'm going to win is go out and meet with people, listen to your questions, and go everywhere. Because I've been everywhere, man. And so the way I'm going to win is go out and meet with people. I'm not going to holler about socialism on TV and try to scare people. I'm trying to give people hope that it's a farmer who doesn't just care about soil conservation. He cares about what's going to happen to the planet, the solutions that are going to make sure there's a planet for their children and their children's children, that they have clean water, nutritious food, and that all starts with your soil. If you want to end up like the Middle East, which was the Garden of Eden, and turn this country into rock and dust, we just keep going down the path we're on. We're halfway there in 100 years. It took them thousands of years to do it. We're halfway there in 100 years.
Mr. Sceniak, I cut you off earlier. Let me go back and allow you to answer or present your views on Roe versus Wade.
Definitely. So I am a Christian, I'll say that up front, and I believe that when I decided to run, my decision was I need to make sure that everybody, no matter what religion they are, has the right to practice their belief in the way that they see fit. So when the government decided to shut down churches, that was ridiculous to me. That's your fundamental right. And if your choice is to not believe, that's your right as well. I will fight for every single religious right to worship. So it doesn't matter that I'm a Christian, I'm going to fight for your church's right or your individual choice not to worship. With Roe versus Wade, I believe that politicians should not act as physicians. And what we see is a government overreach on medical decisions. We've seen it in many areas, and we're seeing it now with Roe versus Wade. So why in Washington do they think, as a politician, that they can make an individual medical decision for you as a woman or you for anything? We have to fight for our rights, and that includes medical rights. So part of my plan for running for Senate is to create a medical freedom bill which absolutely protects the rights of women, and it protects your medical rights. Thank you.
Mr. Sceniak, let me ask you since you have the microphone, let me ask you a two-part question. One, is the Libertarian Party in favor of climate change action by anyone? And if so, how would you get Hoosiers behind climate change action?
So I can't speak for the Libertarian Party, but I can speak for myself. And I'm absolutely on board with taking care of our planet. It's important to me that we sustain our planet for our future generations. When I look at my nieces, I want them to have a clean planet. I want them to be able to thrive. And that includes pollution, that includes clean water. So yes, we need to preserve our world. There's many, many ways we can do this, but one of the things I'd love to point out is one of the worst polluters right now in the world is our military complex. They're absolutely wasting and polluting our whole environment. Nobody talks about this when it comes to the pollution. So one of the best things we can do currently for climate and for pollution is to reduce waste within our own military complex. Let's start there, and then we can work on other restrictions and ways to clean up our planet and make sure that our air is absolutely fresh for future generations.
I mean, there's no doubt in my mind, I'm 53 years old, and I believe I've seen the climate change in my lifetime. All right? I think it's, you go out to California, I have relatives out there. When I was a kid, I remember one fire my entire childhood close to where I grew up in California. One, it was traumatic, I remember it. I was about 12 or 13, if I remember correctly. Now there's fire season. They have two different fire forces where I grew up. They have the city fire force, and then they have the mountain guys, the guys, the hot, whatever, what do they call it, Jeff? Hot shots. That's my fire chief, Jeff Smith, everybody. Hi, Jeff, how's it going? He drove me here. Not in the fire truck, by the way, in the city here. The hot shots. But so, getting back to climate change. I believe climate change is happening, and this is such a difficult issue because I believe it's also one of the most important issues we're debating, not just in the United States, in the world. All right? The problem is this. Our party is really active. My party, the Democratic Party, wants to be the leaders on this issue, and I get it. But part of being leaders on this issue is making sure we have like-minded individuals in the U.S. Senate that can actually make things happen. And sometimes we get out in front of ourselves because we don't really have cooperation from the Republican Party. I wish they were here right now, and we'd have to ask this gentleman to bring it back to our senator for us. Where is the Republican Party on this issue? They're not supportive, they're not cooperative, and quite frankly, they politicize every issue that comes up. I heard a stat today that China just came back online after their lockdowns, and China uses 18 million barrels a gallon a day. So, if in America we convince our fellow Americans that we need to take aggressive actions, and other countries in the world aren't following suit, China's not following suit, India's not following suit, you know, it's not really, I understand we have to lead the way, but this isn't just a one-party issue. We have to get our country united behind this agenda, and then we have to get the world united behind the same agenda so that we can actually make a difference. Until that time, if it's just the Democratic Party pushing this issue on their own, look what's going on in the world right now. Joe Biden's getting beat up for the price of gas. Joe Biden can't control the price of gas. Price of gas is high across the world. So I'm afraid, because our party really pushes hard on this issue, and it's super important, I totally agree, but if we're the only ones pushing on this issue and it gets politicized, we're all going to lose office, and you're going to have a bunch of people that are closed-minded on this issue. So we have to be strategic about this, and we can't just do it alone as a country. We have to do it as a world. We have to get China on board. We have to get India on board. If we're really going to make a difference on this, we can't do it by ourselves because China's out there burning 14 million barrels of gas a day. So as much as we do here in America, if we cripple our economy and injure the American worker, and we can't compete anymore with the Chinas and the Indias, you know, we may have made the world a little safer place, but if China's on the other side of the world burning all that oil and not doing anything about it, it's a major problem. So I hope I explained myself well. I appreciate the question.
Boy, my favorite question. So I drove here in a Chevy Bolt. It cost $35,600. It looked like every car that went around me probably cost more than that. I charge it on the solar panels in my backyard during the day because wind energy doesn't want to pay me anything for it. So I'm driving for free. But that's not going to save the planet. There's only one chance we got. And I hope you listen. We have to create, and Indiana is a leader in not only the United States but in the world. We have to create the soil's carbon sponge. Where did the carbon come from? It came from out of the ground. It has to go back in the ground. We use the power of sunlight through a miracle called photosynthesis. So when we grow corn, when we grow beans, when we grow wheat, when we grow cover crops, we're sequestering carbon into the soil, along with other harmful chemicals. But carbon dioxide, those plants live on it. The sun drives the power of it. And when you put it into the soil, you build the soil because the biology feeds off the carbon. That's what rich black soils are. 50% carbon. So when you put that carbon into the soils, you grow higher yield. You grow more nutritious food. You got cleaner water. You're creating a sponge. We don't want the water going down the Wabash and out into the Gulf. We want it in that corn. We want it growing your food. When we put that carbon in the soil, it accelerates the healing of the ground. We have highly degraded soils in this country. We can build them back with the power of the sun through photosynthesis. Indiana leads the country with 1.5 million acres of cover crop. It's a national movement. So we only grow corn a third of the year, or beans. When we put a cover crop out there, we're sequestering carbon the year round. When we don't work the ground, no till or never till, you don't bust the carbon back in the air. Where does the carbon dioxide come? A huge amount came out of the soil. We lost the carbon, the richness of our soil, because of tillage. Where does most of the nitrous oxide come from? Nitrogen fertilizer. I grow lagoons to produce the nitrogen that are using the sunlight, using the soil. We don't have any other way to do it. Nothing that is going to work fast enough to save the planet. We're at the tipping point.
And only by using the tens of millions of acres in this country and around the world, this is a worldwide movement, it's the only way we can keep from going beyond the tipping point. The coal-fired power plants are shutting down. We're getting electric cars, but the carbon's already up there. It's already causing climate change. Every farmer knows it. And every farmer will realize it's their responsibility to say this, because I'm going to go to Washington, D.C. and make sure they all understand that the soil health movement, the carbon sponge, is what's going to save this planet. If Tucson gets in, this is what's going to happen.
I'm going to combine a couple of questions. Since we touched on inflation earlier, I have to admit one of these is largely mine. Inflation may have several causes. Government debt increased by approximately $22.5 trillion under Bush, Obama, and Trump combined. The Federal Reserve has had low interest rates for at least 14 years in order to increase the price of housing and stocks. The government showered money on the populace during the pandemic. Tariffs imposed by Trump, continued by Biden, increased the cost of imported goods. The pandemic has disrupted supply lines and caused shortages. Restricted immigration has contributed to labor shortages. And yet, when people think about gas prices, they blame President Biden. What do you think can be done to bring inflation down?
This is a great question. It's insane right now where we are economically. And that's why my fiscal sanity plan is going to fight inflation. There's numerous ways we can do that. Todd Young likes to run on inflation, but the fact is he is the cause of inflation. He's overspending. And we know that because we can look at his record. So, yes, there's many, many things that contribute to inflation, but the first one is when we keep printing money, it's going to make our money less valuable. If I gave you a printer and told you that you could print as much money as you wanted, you would know that money is no longer valuable. That's exactly what our federal government is doing. When we're talking about the supply chain, yes, there might be some issues there, but there's immediate solutions that we can look at. And Todd Young refuses to look at these. For example, repealing the Jones Act. That's just one way to get goods faster into America. And even things like the baby formula with tariffs, they made it absolutely ridiculous to have trade across borders. So, yes, supply chain, we can fix that, but we're not looking at solutions. Todd Young isn't looking at solutions. When it comes to the supply chain and then the printing, and then we're looking at gas. Just reduce the gas tax, right? It's 54 cents in Indiana. It's 20 cents on the federal level. You're paying 70 cents per gallon. And yeah, it's like putting a Band-Aid on a wound that's bleeding, but it will help Hoosiers' wallets immediately. So if we want an immediate remedy, there's that. And then if we want to really, truly fix the issue for future generations, we have to bring fiscal sanity to Washington. And we have to do that by making our money valuable again, and by not printing as much and not just wasting it on a federal level.
That question, who did that question? It was probably the best worded question I've heard on the campaign trail. Is that you? I want to take it with me, it was so good. Jennifer? That was an amazing question. It was literally kicked off each point on what has led to where we are today with inflation. And it's so simple just to point at Joe Biden like Todd Young's doing. Oh, Joe Biden's the cause of the gas prices. And everybody's frustrated. It cost me over $100 to fill up my truck. That's frustrating. And so when our U.S. Senator points to the President of the United States and says, it's his fault, we're all like, ah! I'm a finance major and I understand it. I know there's a lot of people that do. Economics is very complicated. And whoever the President of the United States would have been right now, if it had been President Trump or if it had been Joe Biden, we'd still be paying $500 plus than our gas prices right now. All right? And quite frankly, our U.S. Senator Todd Young should take a leadership role on this issue. I dare say he wants us to pay more. And let me explain why. Because of just what I said. He's playing Joe Biden right now, and people believe him. So it's in his political best interest not to fix this problem, to have you pay higher gas prices so that he gets reelected. And I tell you, that may sound like a paranoid fantasy, but it's true. He doesn't want inflation to get fixed. He doesn't want the price of gas to go down because he thinks that's his ticket to get reelected. And I find that disgusting, and I think it's part of the reason we're in the situation in America we are right now. We sent Todd Young to Washington, D.C. to fix problems like this, and to be a leader, and not just appoint if the President of the United States has been there for 2 years. He's been in Washington, D.C., Todd Young, for 12 years. What has he done to lower the cost of gas? What has he done to lower the price, the inflation rate we're paying? He doesn't want to lower it. He wants us to pay more. And by the way, if I were a U.S. Senator in Todd Young's situation, I'd pull the Republican supermajority aside and the governor and say, give the Hoosiers a break. 50 cents on the price of gas right now when the state coffers have so much money, they sent us $150 back. Keep your $150. That lasts me 1 week in my truck. Give us some real relief. You can lower the tax rate right now, 50 cents a gallon, with no problems at all. They can easily get it through the supermajority, and they choose not to. Why? They want the gas prices high. They want us to suffer so that we vote them back into office, and we can't let them do it. Thank you.
That was a good question, and it was very insightful, and, you know, like most really tough problems that we have, there's no magic answer. But I'm sure if you ask the oil companies, they would say, no, it's not. The price of oil is not too high. The person that puts it in their car is going to say it's way too high. It's a commodity. Corn is a commodity. Lumber is a commodity. All of these things are traded. To trade on the commodities market, one person has to offset the other contract. So every time it goes up, somebody is offsetting that contract, saying it's going down. Now, they didn't mention that not only is the fuel tax in Indiana, but the sales tax is put on top of that. So Indiana gets a pretty large share of the cost of that fuel. The federal government gets about 18 cents. So on a $5 gallon of gas, the commodity is costing somewhere around $3. But commodities are traded back and forth based on supply and demand. So the demand for energy is up. People are saying, well, we should drill more. Do you know that we're bringing in as much energy now as in 2014 when the price of fuel was $1.92? We are not bringing it in from Russia. If you're on the side of Russia and think we ought to be bringing that in to keep our gas price in, you're on the wrong side of what I believe. What they're doing is Ukraine, I'm willing to sacrifice. Farmers use a lot of energy, but I'm willing to sacrifice. But other things like COVID reduced and caused inflation. A lot of women are not going back to work because of childcare costs. A lot of people retired. Transportation, truck drivers. I go around and talk to these businesses in the 8th district, who Sean couldn't even tell you their names, and logistics, running trucks back and forth to get their materials in and out of the market. That's the biggest problem. You know, fuel surcharges are offsetting the price of that fuel for truckers and for a friend of mine's the president of the railroad and so forth. But a lot of different things contribute to inflation. A lot of those things have come together at the same time, causing things to rise in cost. But all incomes have also risen. So as the workforce has shortened up and the supply, more people are getting higher wages. Unemployment is way down. So there's people getting more, there's oil companies getting more. My golly, the price of corn the other day was $8 a bushel. I sold it for $4. I hate it when that happens.
The guy that raises hogs, he wants the price of corn down here. The farmer that raises the corn wants it up here. And that's how commodities are traded back and forth. It always offsets by supply and demand. That's what's driving this market. Now, if you say, why aren't more oil companies drilling? Because the financiers, Wall Street and bankers are saying, no way. We just went through this long period of big losses. Now you're making record prices and profits. We're not going to go out here and loan you a bunch of money to drill a bunch more. And then the price collapses and we go back into the situation where Americans are converting over to energy efficiency and electric cars. I will say, that's baloney. I've got electric pickup orders at Rutgers Ford. They're going to get one, and they've got 300 orders at Jasper. 300 orders are getting one. So this country is going to go electric vehicles. So the price of oil is going to go down. Wait and see.
It seems that voting rights may be under attack, particularly in some of the red states. How would you suggest that voting rights be protected, particularly in those states that are controlled by Republican legislatures, and where the other parties or parties have very little influence? Mr. Mcdermott, let me ask you first.
Indiana is definitely gerrymandered. We all know that. I mean, last presidential election, I'm going off the top of my head, probably 46% for the president, 47% for the president, in that ballpark. And if you look at the Indiana House of Representatives, we have 30% of the representatives in the House of Representatives and about 20-something% in the Indiana Senate. That's gerrymandering. We voted around 45, 46%, but they've drawn the district so skewed that they have 70 and 80% of the power in their state houses. That's a problem. So for us to be able to remedy that problem, elections have consequences. And for us to be able to remedy that problem, we have to either elect people that are more open-minded and anti-gerrymandering, or we have to pass a bill federally. And the U.S. House of Representatives did pass a bill that would outlaw gerrymandering and make it easier to vote, make it easier to get registered. And what happened? That bill passed the U.S. House, it went to the U.S. Senate, and it died because we couldn't get 60 votes to overcome the filibuster. Which goes back to my previous point. I didn't spend 6 years in the United States Navy defending the Constitution of the United States so that politicians could pick their districts and their voters. I didn't do that. Thank you. I spent 6 years in the Navy defending the Constitution of the United States, and I believe in the concept that you give me a district, I'm going to work that district hard and earn your respect. But we've allowed our elected officials to pick their voters for too long, and it's time to change it. The only way to change it federally, where I'm going, the U.S. Senate, is to get rid of the filibuster and let majority rule again. And by the way, I know there's people that are worried about that. The word filibuster isn't contained one time in the U.S. Constitution. We made that rule up, and now that rule is it's not working. So we need to get rid of the filibuster and start pushing forward bills that'll make gerrymandering not legal, unconstitutional. Thank you.
Voting is the most essential part of the democratic process. It's how your voice is heard. And right now in Indiana, we don't even have 60% of people voting, registered voters. So we need to change how we vote, and we need to also make sure we're representing Hoosier voices. But when we look at election integrity, we have to look at what office was that, and that's the Secretary of State. Right now, the Republicans hold it, and they don't feel like they need to change anything or make sure that your vote counts in the way that you know that it counts. So we have to look for an option that brings accountability to that Secretary of State race. As well, we have to make the next generations aware of how important their vote is. And then the next step is to make voting easier for everybody. So we have to look at solutions that allow voters easy access to be able to vote, It baffles me that, like, in a Hoosier lottery system, that you have more trust in the Hoosier lottery system with a winning ticket than you do on your ballot and where your vote is going. So we definitely need to restore trust in our process because we need to hear your voice, and that's the most important part of the democratic process.
Almost forgot what the question is because it's so obvious, but in Indiana, one of the Democratic strongholds is Bloomington. So you know what they did? Sliced it up into 3 House seats. The little town of Bloomington has been carved up so that they can dilute it. Is that democracy? Hell no, it's not. It's the opposite. You get tired of hearing me talk about farming, but you can buy that $1 million combine online. We bought a tractor online. I paid 2 payments to the bank today online. You can do all kinds of very serious stuff. It's huge money online. You ought to be able to get online and register the vote and vote. You can do everything else online. Let's make it as easy for people that don't have a driver's license, the people that are handicapped, the elderly that have to go through now not having a driver's license or being in a nursing home and go through all the hurdles. Let's make it so you have a username and a password like you can everything else, and make it that easy to vote. Thank you.
I have a question specifically, only to Mr. Sceniak, to educate me a little bit about the Libertarian platform. The Libertarian platform calls for the government to get out of healthcare regulation and let the market respond to people's healthcare needs. However, Medicare, the Affordable Health Care Act, and the Medicare, the Affordable Health Care Act, and the Affordable Health Care Act's requirement to cover pre-existing conditions, all were government imposed because the market did not cover old people, poorer people who could not afford health insurance, and people with pre-existing conditions. If the government gets out of healthcare regulation and out of providing Medicare, what makes you think the market would provide for old people, poor people, and people with pre-existing conditions this time when it didn't before?
That's a great question. I'm going to start with email I actually just got yesterday from Catherine. And she's a nurse up in northern Indiana, and she said, James, I looked at your platform, and you're right. My field is being overregulated, and I'm advocating as a voice because of it. She's like, there is a nursing shortage, and she says it's not a matter of growing bodies, it's the fact that we're being so regulated, and the elderly are not being taken care of because of this issue. My mother shared the same story of my grandfather in the nursing home. They can't find people to take care of it, and they all are citing overregulation. So the reverse problem now has happened, where we've overregulated the medical field, and now people are not being taken care of as well. So when we talk about taking and reducing regulations, there are simple solutions like the patent war. When we make the patent war more competitive, we'll reduce prices like insulin, so that insulin becomes cheaper, and we don't have to have the government involved in that. There is a lot to this. Medicare, part of Social Security as well. When we talk about the Cato plan, it's not immediately just dismissing Medicare for everybody. The Cato plan is a 6.2% plan where the portion that you personally pay actually goes back to your retirement fund. But then the part that your employer pays goes to those who are already on the system, so it still takes care of it. The libertarian solution that I'm presenting is an incremental solution, removing the red tape that's unnecessary and still allowing for some regulations to make sure that those who need health care and those are not being turned down. So some libertarians may present it as a complete withdrawal. I present it as we need just to make sure that our elderly are being taken care of and that we have enough nurses. Because like teachers, there is a nursing shortage. Thank you.
Next question is for Mr. Mcdermott. And Sherry, I think you're going to have to help me on this one. I can't quite read your writing. South Shore line has expanded in Lake County? In Lake County. Are there any plans to expand the South Shore line from Chicago to India?
Oh, that'd be wonderful. We have an 8-mile extension that's going from my city in Hammond to basically the Munster Dyer area. I know, a lot of you aren't familiar with Northwest Indiana like I am. It's incredible though. An 8-mile stretch is going to cost at the end of the day about $800 million. That's a perfect example of what screwed up Washington, D.C. is right there. I'm super happy it's happening, and it's going to make a world of difference for my city and for the residents who rely on public transportation. But for 8 miles, $100 million a mile, it's flabbergasting. It's going to be huge for us, though. I believe, like when you go to Europe and you connect to different countries and different cities, and you take rail everywhere you go. I think that's something we should strive for in America because it's cleaner. It's very efficient, but we haven't invested in the infrastructure in America. And if we could have some type of high-speed rail from Indianapolis to all parts of Indiana, I would be taking it right now instead of relying on my fire chief to drive me everywhere. So it's a noble goal. I do appreciate Senator Young's support on that. In all due respect, he did help by voting in the affirmative for that $800 million project. So I appreciate that as the mayor of Northwest Indiana's largest city, but it is incomprehensible to me how expensive an 8-mile extension is. So thank you for the question.
It's 7:25. I've got a couple more questions that I would like to get through. I would like to ask you to keep your answers extremely brief. And then, I don't know that it's in the program, but I'd like to give each of you not over 2 minutes to wrap up. The next question: do you believe the VA adequately serves our veterans, most especially with health care? And if not, how do you plan to improve upon it? I don't know who has the mic. Mr. Mcdermott? Mr. McCormick, I don't care who has the mic. But be brief.
Well, let me tell you a story. Is that Donald Trump did a good thing. He made it so veterans could go to private care. My wife is an optometrist. Now they don't have to drive for hundreds of miles. They can go to my wife's office and get an eye exam, get their problem taken care of. These are great people coming in her office that deserve good care, and they're getting it. So that's the experience I have, that was a good change. Certainly we have to honor our veterans and have as good a quality of life and try to end as much suicide and homelessness as we can. So there's a multitude of solutions there. But my short story is that's one example. You talk about the red tape and so forth. That's a huge problem in this country. They solved that one by allowing veterans to go to local doctors if there's not veteran care locally. So that's a good example.
Thank you.
No, I know we're supposed to answer short. I've served 6 years in the United States Navy, honorable discharge, served on submarine during wartime. I don't believe we treat our veterans well enough at all in America. And I was enlisted, by the way. I wasn't an officer. I was the one that did the saluting. I was the one that cleaned the bilges. I was the one that did the work on the sub. And I think we need to particularly focus on the blue-collar enlisted workers who oftentimes aren't as adequately or as financially prepared as the former officers were. But I do believe we can do a better job of taking care of our veterans, and I want to be part of the solution. So thank you for the question.
No, we're not taking care of our veterans. The VA is not taking care of our veterans. And that's why it's one of my 3 main points that I'm running on. I created a vet care program. One of my first campaign stops, I met Rory, and he said we need to serve our veterans better through health care. And he looked at me and he said, I can't even sit up for an hour, but this is so important, I came out to talk to you. My last town hall, I had a 90-year-old man that said, I need new legs, but I can't do it because of the red tape. I said, my Medicare program fixes that. I already have a program that is ready to help veterans. It's called VetCare, and it uses a system called Veterans Personal Care Account. If you're familiar with a health savings account, it's very similar to that, but it completely removes the waste of the VA, giving money directly to veterans so that they don't have to use any red tape, and they get their medical care wherever they need, and they can also choose whatever physician best meets their needs without having to go through a ridiculous amount of red tape to get that care. They've served us. We have to fulfill our obligation in taking care of their needs. If you want to find out more about my vet care program, please feel free to take one of my brochures. It's on the back and it details it, and I appreciate you looking at that, and that's a great question, and it's something I'm running on. Thank you.
At the risk of running over, I'm going to ask one more question, and that concerns rural internet service. What is being done, or what should be done to improve it?
Give it to us.
So ultimately, I think that internet service from the federal level should be regulated from the federal level. We should let the free market take care of that, and it's something that's important that we get to everybody. But at the same time, the government with red tape is just going to make it worse, and we need to allow the free markets to come in and to get the internet to all over the state.
But they're not.
In rural America, I think we need to do, Democratic Party needs to do a better job of getting our message out there, because there's hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars, built in the infrastructure bill and the American Rescue Plan that would help the broadband connection in rural America, in rural Indiana. And our U.S. Senator, Todd Young, who's watching right there on that TV, on that camera, our U.S. Senator put his name on the infrastructure bill, which is going to dramatically upgrade the broadband connections in rural parts of Indiana. Todd Young puts his name on there until, of course, he gets a phone call from a resident of Florida that says, if you don't take your name off that bill, Senator Young, I'm going to make sure you have a primary challenge in Indiana. And Senator Young did as he was told. And he pulled his name off a bill that could help rural Indiana. They could help the broadband connections, they could help with our schools, they could help with our roads and our bridges, because he didn't want to get a primary challenge. Now that's not a leader, and that's not a guy that's doing anything to help improve broadband connections right here. So I think Todd Young needs to be fired for that, and I appreciate you guys asking the question.
And let's be clear, every Republican in Indiana at the congressional and senatorial level voted against it. My opponent was all for infrastructure. My God, he lives on the Ohio River, or used to, where the lock and dams are way outdated. It's killing the transportation system, and he voted against it. Broadband, I'm sorry, but the rural electrification of Indiana was one of the biggest things that ever happened in rural Indiana. If you want to let the market take care of it, the people that live down the road wouldn't have got electricity because it wouldn't have reduced the profit. There are some things like internet service where the U.S. can help facilitate that and help pay for that. That's what that infrastructure bill was about, besides the lock of dams. And that's not just broadband. Broadband is several different things. I get mine off of a tower. Some get it with the cable, some get it with the satellite. So it's not just one thing. It's improving that system and having the government help do that. So the people way down the road that some people don't care about, that you got internet service. So your little business out there at your house can thrive across the countryside. How many of them are doing that right now? It's revolutionized business. It's allowed at the Good Samaritan Hospital for a large number of their employees to work from home. You get hospitalization from home. You get doctor care from home. You get nursing from home. So you don't have to drive and get those services. That's what the internet can do for us in rural Indiana. We gotta have what we need to keep up.
You'll keep the microphone, I would ask you to take over, not over 2 minutes to sum up.
All right, glad to. Well, I think you've heard everything I got to say. Just let me summarize it. I'm a farmer who spent his whole life, it was my calling to do everything I could to not only take care of the resources on my land, but I learned early in life to build partnerships and find people across the country that would help fight for clean air, clean water, endangered species, all these conservation issues. Now, as I'm thinking about it more, you know, it's taking care of God's creation. So if you believe in God, then you believe that land out there that He created should be taken care of. And I think that's why I was put on earth, and that's why I'm running for Congress. I'm not out here running on these wedge issues. I'm saying we have to fundamentally take care of our land, or our future goes down to the Gulf. Thank you for having me. Thanks for letting us come to your school, and Mountain County is a beautiful place. It was an honor to be here. Thank you.
Mr. Sceniak, I'm going to incorporate a final question. In your summation, would you address your strategy to defeat Todd Young in November?
Address my strategy?
Yes.
Well, look at his record. We all know he's not representing Hoosiers. No matter where you fall on the political spectrum, he doesn't represent you. He doesn't represent rural communities. He doesn't represent the cities. He doesn't represent minorities. He does not represent Hoosiers. So in conclusion, I want you to look at a fresh, modern approach to Washington, D.C. We have a chance and an opportunity to hear our voices and represent them better. When we talk about a lot of solutions, the federal government isn't where we find those solutions. We find them within our communities, and we find them on the state level, but the federal government is only wasting your money. And that's why we see them keep printing more and more money, why our wallets are hurting right now. So if we want to look at a true new approach, we have to reduce the waste in Washington. I'm the only party that wants to reduce spending in Washington right now. I want to represent you, Hoosier voices. That's why I'm out here. I appreciate this two-way conversation. I know that there's issues that we may or may not disagree on or agree on, but we can have conversations, and that's what I want to show. These public forums are just that. Todd Young, he calls these conversations absurd. He calls them publicity stunts. He does not represent Hoosier voices. If he did, he would be here and he would be in the community hearing through your voices.
David is right. Todd Young was invited. The Republican Party was invited. We've done, I don't know how many of these stops we've done now. We've done all over the state of Indiana, and we're going to keep going all over the state of Indiana. And we're going to keep inviting the Republican Party to these events, and they're going to keep saying no. They don't want to talk to you. I'm Tom Mcdermott. I'm a Democratic nominee for U.S. Senate. I was unremarkable as a kid, being honest. I grew up in a divorced family. My dad moved to Hammond, Indiana. My mom lived in California. And I graduated from high school, joined the United States Navy. 6 years. Enlisted. Graduated out of the United States Navy, qualified submarines. I was a U.S. Navy diver. I was an electrician in a nuclear plant, got an honorable discharge. Used the GI Bill, it's important to me. Put myself through Purdue Northwest. Graduated with honors. Got accepted to University of Notre Dame Law School. I was super honored to go there. Met my wife there. Got married there. Had a kid there. Moved to Northwest Indiana. I got my wife to move from New York to Northwest Indiana, so obviously I'm a great salesman, right? And I became mayor of the city 4 years later. And I've been there for 5 terms because I'm really good at my job. I really care about people's problems and I want to help. I'm a public servant. And I want to be your U.S. Senator so I can take what we do in City Hall to Washington, D.C. and teach these other senators and other representatives how to be good public servants. And get back to being Americans and working together to solve difficult issues like climate change, like our spiraling debt, like our inadequate healthcare system. We have so many problems in America right now. We're too busy fighting with each other. Vladimir Putin is really happy right now because we're so divided we can't even fight against our true enemies. I want to get back to being Americans again. My dad's Republican. He loves me, and I love him. Okay? And we have interesting dinner conversations at Thanksgiving. But I think what we need to do is get back to being Americans again. And disagreeing politely about our politics, but working together in the spirit of this country, and that's what I want to do. It may sound naive, but that's what I want to bring to Washington, D.C. So please give me your consideration in November. Thank you, everybody.
I want to thank the candidates. They have all come a long ways, and that's because Fountain County is a bit isolated. I also want to thank all of you folks for coming out. I do apologize for not giving credit to each of the questions that I asked, but we had some overlapping questions, and so I thought I would amalgamate some of those. So thank you so much. We appreciate it.
One last thing, can we all give a hand to our principals here who opened up the doors for us? Thank you very much. Have a good day, y'all.